Welcome to Design Thinking Games, a fantasy and user experience podcast. Each episode, your podcast hosts, Tim Broadwater and Michael Schofield, will examine the player experience of board games, pen and paper role-playing games, live-action games, mobile games, and video games. You can find every episode, including this one, on your podcatcher of choice and on the web at designthinkinggames.com.
One of the things I'd like to talk about is something that's relevant as to when we're recording and releasing this episode, specifically about Pride Month, which is coming up in June 2021.
Yeah.
Most people know this, but it was actually President Bill Clinton in the United States of America that declared June as Gay and Lesbian Pride Month. And that was back in 1999, which at this point is, oh my God, 22 years ago?
My
I think
feelings.
So, yeah. Math, right?
I didn't know that that Wild Bill instituted that. That is a fact I didn't know.
Yeah, he declared
1999, dang.
Yeah, and he declared it in 99 and 2000. And then there was, of course, like a lull, I think, in the George W. Bush presidency. But since Bill Clinton already said it, it was kind of like, we're grandfathered in. So it just kind of became that, right? But then also, like, in 2009, I think Barack Obama, the president, kind of brought that back up and officially declared it for, from 2009 to 2016. And then here recently, our president, Donald Trump, also acknowledged LGBT Pride Month in 2019, kind of going forward.
That was a surprising one.
Yeah, so it's kind of stuck. But so in regards to that and Pride Month, and I think businesses and technologies, of course, kind of jumped onto it. I don't know. I have a limited amount of experience with LGBT characters and stories and games, and I'm gonna just say this first and foremost. The Last of Us 2 is probably one of the most famous characters.
Well, it's relevant. It's recent. I suppose like spoilers, right, for Last of Us, and spoilers for probably not major spoilers for the games that we're talking about. But that was also a highly politicized one too. Yes. That announcement was controversially received, right? Yeah. To put it like politically, right?
I think that there's a lot of strong feelings, I think, in the gamer community in regards to canon. What's canon? What's not? An opinion on what can be, this is inappropriate or whatever. And so I know, like gaming, as you're mentioning, like with Last of Us 2 and the character, the lead character, Ellie, being kind of gay, or lesbian, actually, not gay. That's controversy. And it makes me think, like, kind of keep going back to, I guess, female Ghostbusters and Black Stormtroopers, and just changing or progressing, kind of a narrative or a fandom, and kind of growing it into like a new kind of area. So Last of Us 2 is definitely really controversial, I think.
Well, it's one of those things where, it's like anything that displaces kind of like the norm, right? Sort of the status quo, and especially it can be interpreted as an attack on a group's power and hegemony. Like all of these changes over the last let's like just a couple decades now, especially as gaming has become increasingly mainstream, reflect that. Adding gay relationships into Mass Effect, which the Legendary Edition at the time we recorded this came out a couple weeks ago, and Mass Effect, the first one, which highlighted the ability to have relationships with your party members, introduced gay ones. And I remember at the time that was a big deal. It was on Fox News. You know, it was one of these things.
Yeah, it was 2009, right? Because
2007 is when Mass Effect 1 came out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, so but I think, you know, what for Last of Us, right? And then Last of Us 2, I think what we see in Last of Us 2 is at least living with a female companion and a farm. They have a child, you know, and it's accepted in their community, which is this kind of rural, kind of mountain, kind of farming, kind of ish community where everyone knows and no one has a problem with it, you know. And there's kind of both bisexuality and lesbianism, and the community's okay with it. And the way that it's treated to where it's just normal, it's not anything different, that it's just kind of, oh, this is just how this couple is. You know, that I think is what is refreshing to LGBT players and gamers when they kind of experience that game, you know?
I imagine there's a spectrum, right? Where, you know, there's a spectrum between pandering and then representation, right? And I imagine the, you know, as a white cis hetero, like, you know, I'm well represented, so I don't know what it is to be under. But like I've got to imagine there's, like I said, like this difference. Like you know, you can tell when, like as a person, when you're being pandered to, and maybe, you know, early in, you know, like early in gaming history, pandering to was the best case scenario, the best one could ask for. Maybe pandering to was refreshing at that moment. But then, like to your point, like when it's just represented as normal, where it's not even brought up as part of like the character story, right? Like, so when Mass Effect in 2007, which is again top of mind, the Legendary Edition just came out, so I'm replaying it. There were a couple of things that came out, you know, like on one, like the lesbian relationships that you could form as femshep and you know, like, you know, those could be argued as not being truly gay because the Asari partner that you could form, I mean, their entire species is like female presenting, right? So there is no, you know, like gender distinction there, which on one hand is really interesting too. On the other hand, like it was a huge like highly sexualized thing, right? So like femshep, so like in Mass Effect you can play as a male shepherd or a female shepherd. Femshep is pretty hot, and like all of the female characters like throughout the Mass Effect series are, you know, designed like for the most part by like dude comic book artists, right? And there is this, you know, thing where it's like this is a like a fun, like exploitative like perk, especially when you compare that. I forget if it's possible in Mass Effect 3, but I'm pretty sure in Mass Effects 1 and 2 you can't have a male gay relationship. And so in this case there's a degree of pandering, there's a degree of LGBT as a feature, as like as a perk, and then you cross like the spectrum. So I don't know, maybe it's more on the pandering end of the spectrum or on the exploitative end of the spectrum, but then you go all the way, maybe I think to the other side, where I think Don't Nod's Tell Me Why, which is this game that is in the vein of like the Life is Strange series or even like Telltale's Walking Dead, this kind of rejuvenation of these popular point and click narratives, choose your own adventure type games, where Tell Me Why, you know, the main character is a trans man, and it is a part of the narrative in the sense that, you know, that presents, you know, social obstacles for this character, but it's not the point of the story like at all. And it is the first time, you know, like I can think of that in the game, but it was also done, I think, really respectfully and well, and it was additive to the game. It was super interesting. Put yourself in these shoes.
Yeah, that's interesting because, you know, I can't say much either. I am a white cisgender male homosexual, right? So I'm not that, you know, but I will say this, like, I think people respond to when it's just a story and it's just normal.
Yeah.
Like, you can't always lead though with like, hey, this is this new side-scrolling action adventure and it's a gay plumber who's Italian and he's saving, you know, if you led that way, you know, well, this is one part of this character. It's not the whole thing, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the design challenge, right? Because like right now the conversation is, and you know, I speak from the authority of having I don't know, frankly, like associating with many fragile male egos in my life, even currently, frankly, where the argument is often put out there as, regardless of its legitimacy, but this is how I hear it phrased most often is, these people are trying to hit a diversity quota, or because that productized narratives in games or movies or series are a numbers game that, you know, they want to in fact, this is actually, I think, a pretty good argument, but it's like they want to include more diversity specifically to increase viewership or readership, right? But the frankly, that seems like a great reason to like to diversify like the narrative. But the slight there, the unspoken slight, is that this is insincere.
One of the things to kind of note about what you said is that there's franchises that, this character maybe happens to be gay in film or comic book or what have you, and then when we make the game version of it, you know, do we include that or do we not include that? But then there's also, I think, we just see kind of a movement more towards not just main characters, but side characters and other characters in games that are bisexual or lesbian or gay and or trans. And I think we start to see like characters that kind of show up in Grand Theft Auto that are basically like, here is a construction worker, or here is a police officer, or here's a side quest, right, where it has like something about find my ex-boyfriend or something of that nature. And I think there is I remember back to, you know, being like the first experience that I ever had of like a gay character in a game, and I don't even know which one it was, but it was one of the Sims versions, back when the Sims were on everything and they just kept releasing Sims all the time, like Sims Pool House Party or Sims like Auto Show or Pin, and they would just like keep giving you stuff that you can buy and like add on. But I could remember that you could make, at a certain point, there was a time where you could actually make two people live together and do things together, and after enough time you could get them to buy gifts for each other and build affection, and it was like, I can build a Gaymer hood, you know, I could actually build like all of these different types of relationships. I think it's great seeing characters that are of different diversities, different, you know, just different stories in comic books, in movies, in series, in games. It's like just kind of what I think Pride has become in general. Maybe what people associate with it, or what I think over 50 years has just become a call for diversity and inclusion, you know, and to celebrate that in the month of June.
It's been really cool to experience. It's been neat. At first it tells like a great story. So there's this one case where like did you ever play the game Gone Home?
This sounds familiar to me.
Gone Home was like, for lack of a better term, it's called like a walking simulator. There's not even like a plot, arguably, and you are I forget the name of the character, but you are a first person a college student, I think, who returns home and the house is empty. Mom and dad are gone. You have like a little sibling who's also gone. It's stormy outside. There's kind of a haunted house type of feel. The lights flicker every so often. And you are wandering around this lived-in house, not perfectly clean, lots of papers everywhere. And you are, I don't know, you find a postcard, you read it. I think it's hard for me to figure out like what the game's about, and I think that was one of the arguments. There's this whole thing where like, Gone Home isn't a game; it is a walking simulator or whatever. But one of the things that you find here is that like as you kind of like through the outside in, you are basically looking through people's drawers, your own drawers, the drawers of your sibling, etc. And you are, for all intents and purposes, this college student returned home. And you don't really discover until, I don't know, like 3 hours in when you're digging through your own room or whatever, that either I think you're gay. The game lets you like immerse, like literally in the first person, like these, this totally other perspective. It's one thing to play like as like femshep, right, in the third person over the shoulder view where you are piloting the character, and it's different when it's first person and you are.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of just in regards to like, hey, everyone's experience is kind of different, and so some people made fun of or everything for Facebook for a while, and I'm personally not on Facebook, but the fact that they could do all of these different type of relationship statuses, all of these kind of different sexualities and different gender identifications. I don't know. I don't think you played Cyberpunk 2077.
No,
but you can.
I
basically can be non-binary. You can be transgender. Is this like the first time? I meant like, can you think of other games that have given you that option? Like at least at this AAA level? That Vampire the Masquerades, I thought that they let you choose your pronouns. I mean, essentially like social media now allows you to kind of, if you fill out your profile as much as you want, but we want to give everyone different options. And so, I think what I like about seeing this in Cyberpunk 2077 and Vampire the Masquerade, it acknowledges and then lets you celebrate or live or experience, kind of your diversity, right? And so the fact that, there are people who are in the world who all don't have the same experience. There are people who are attracted to people of the same sex, or they do not feel like a man, they feel like a woman inside, or maybe they're in a relationship with two different people, maybe they're in a poly relationship, or maybe people are non-binary, that they feel gender fluid, and I think we're starting to see a lot more of that in character creations and profiles, in the way that players can express themselves. A lot of gamers now know themselves through Twitch streams and through Discord and through their online kind of profile. So it's very much like Ready Player One or Ready Player Two, that you can kind of be, your avatar is whoever you can be. And why can't it be completely crazy or completely accurate? And why is it offensive to you? Or, or maybe you're just
funny. Remember the early, like late 90s, early 2000s, and maybe early 2000 knots, maybe persisting like fear of like, it's like never trust that the person you're talking to in the chat room, it really is a 16-year-old girl because it's a 40-year-old man or something like that.
Exactly.
This sort
There's
of like catfishing
and a documentary and a TV show.
MTV show. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But like, this as a threat, like at first the idea, in like early internet life, right, was that, hey, there are people out there posing as something that they aren't, and this is like perverted and creepy and scary and literally threatening in a way. Now,
the
sure,
flip side of that is probably to some degree the opposite,
Well, people are able to like
I feel like
express themselves.
I feel like a blue wolf, I feel like, and I'm gender fluid and I should be able to do these things, or be this thing. Yeah. And then if we look at, popular games like Fortnite, where,
sure,
I want to be John Wick, or I want to be Wolverine, or I want to be, I just want to have blue hair, or I want to be a wolf, or I want to be, it's like, I think we're only going to see that kind of level of like, with games that don't have a specific narrative that writes you as the player into a main character role that doesn't have enough wiggle room to be whatever sex, gender, race. By race, I mean, if you're a robot or a dog or a human or a cyborg or, I don't know. I think you're going to have, some limited wiggle room, but as games can say, like, well, technically speaking, this is the game, your avatar can be whatever. It kind of separates what I think of like separates the hardware from the software, if that makes sense.
No, there's a really interesting dovetail here to like an earlier conversation we had that was all about the growing basic expectation of customizing the user interface. We were like your example was the ability to customize a table throughout a web app where you can say like, I want this column and this column, but not this column. We ended up with a term for it, like operator agnosticism or something like that. But it's the same principle that is just going to scale to avatar and to like presentation. And there's going to be like instances where like the linear story matters in this specific way, and like you're going to tell the story of like some soldier in mid 2000s Fallujah, right? So I'm thinking about like 6 Days in Fallujah. That was like you're going to be kind of like shoehorned into at least probably a gender, right? If not like a specific race, depending on who they're showing. But there's the other side where these kind of like sandboxes where the expectation that you can just be whomever
definitely
is
with
only
Mass
going
Effect,
to
or like Starfinder, or just like future science fiction, like the Star Trek
I'm a
game,
fucking slug human, like I'm a Solarian, right? Like a but it's one of those things where like why, it's just it's the normalization of like being someone different. Not even permanently after, like, other than the person that you were born. Maybe in the future you switch gender several times throughout your life. Something like that seems really appealing.
I think that happens now. Like I think.
Oh sure, yeah.
So essentially, like, two examples that come to mind is like people don't have it. Okay, so this is the thing that I think that as UXers, and it doesn't matter if you're making software services or you're a game. A user experience person that's working on games, I think you have to realize you're working with people, and people want to express themselves in different ways, and people want to are going to want different things out of games, right? And so you're walking along, and Cora, the avatar, becomes a lesbian. What? People flip out. Iceman is now gay. And I love how they explain that in the comic books, to where they went back in time and brought the first X-Men team forward in time, and they're like in today's society, and there's a more acceptance or more inclusivity, and Iceman was like, I'm gay, and he goes to the older Iceman who's like in his 40s now, and he's like, are you not? If I'm you from the past. And he's like, I guess I am. I've just always kind of pushed it down.
Sure.
Never even thought about it. And people may not realize, but everyone doesn't have like the guidebook or the tutorial, right? Like, so to life. So I think people will realize along the way, like if they have an attraction they didn't have before, or if they may feel a different way to where they're not their same gender or sex. And I think as UXers, the thing that kind of encapsulates this, which is realizing, hey, I always think Always kind of like the user. When they talk about the users, it sounds like they're a dirty drug addict, right? But it's like they're people. Like your job is to advocate for people, and people want to express themselves in different ways. And, I think I was completely blown away, like when I see like advances in user interfaces. And I think like the very first time I ever played Secret of Mana, and I saw like the Ring navigation system. I'm not sure if you've ever played Secret of Mana. But it has this Ring navigation system. I'm like, this is the future. Like, this is literally like amazing because it's just different than what everything else. It's not Bootstrap, right? It's something that feels different and works different, and you have to learn it. But then it kind of really is fluid and works, and you can fly through it, right? It's just like the keyboards that are like the different design keyboards, I feel. So I guess my point being is that Pride Month kind of celebrating inclusivity, celebrating diversity. I think we need to just empower people to express themselves in the way that they want to. And we're just going to see more and more of that in social media. We're going to see more of it in games, and we're going to see more of it in any type of product or service that people use.
Well said.
Thank you for listening to the Design Thinking Games podcast. To connect with your hosts, Michael or Tim, please go to designthinkinggames.com, where you can request topics, ask questions, or see what else is going on. Until next time, game on.